for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
All right. Good evening, Fade to Black. How you doing? How you doing? Today is Tuesday, March 19th, 2024. Very excited about the show tonight. Huge week on Fade to Black, by the way. Last night we had Nick Pope. Tonight, of course, Bruce Leininger is with us. Tomorrow night, Carrie Sudmeyer is here. Thursday night, Riz Berg and the 25th anniversary of The Matrix. And then Friday night, a very special show with Jason Quitt. His new book is released. It is called Gates of the Anunnaki. So we're going to do a very special Friday night special event here on Fade to Black with Jason. So 5 nights this week. There goes my Thursday. I have to work on Friday. But tonight, it is the strange case of James Leininger. And the book Soul Survivor and its story of reincarnation is available on Amazon. We have the links for it below. It's also in the chat and over on our website and on social media. Tonight, James's father is here, Bruce, and he graduated from Columbia University Graduate School with a master's in international relations. And his story of his son, told in the book Soul Survivor, the reincarnation of a World War II fighter pilot, has changed his life. And of course it has. And I'm a parent. And for all of you parents out there, this is a story that you need to pay attention to and help people like myself to embrace reincarnation. And I would like to welcome back to Fade to Black, by the way, Bruce Leininger. Bruce, good evening, young man. How are you?
Well, thanks for the compliment of young man, but I'm certainly glad to be here.
Hey, our children are about the same age. So I get to call you young man and enjoy it. Yeah, we're right there with each other, Bruce. Okay. And I'm very excited about the show, and thank you for being here. This the story of James. I have been interested. From the word go, when I had first heard about the case and read about the case and started to research it, and of course got the book. It was just fat, and for me, Bruce, I'm going to say this. I don't want to offend anybody, but I'm a guy. As a matter of fact, I'm a man's man. And as a boy growing up, we all do the same things. We play Army. We got the little, the little green dudes playing the sandbox and planes and helicopters and astronauts and space and all of that stuff. That's part of our childhood growing up. And when I grabbed hold of James and his story, I couldn't help but just relate to all of it and then think to myself, is it possible? Could I have those memories too as well? And could there be something involved with this? Which took me down the road at a very young age to what reincarnation is all about. And that came from my mother. She explained it to me when I was very, very young. So I've got my own ideas of what the definition of reincarnation is. And so does our audience. But for you and what you have gone through and what you do now to help others, what is your definition of reincarnation?
I sign each one of the books that I sign for someone personally. Nurture your soul, for you are on an eternal journey. with God's blessing. Now, regardless of how you identify God, whether it's God or Yahweh or Muhammad, there's a creator. The major religions of the world agree on a creation and creator. So if our souls go, and the way I signed the book also covers how I had to reconcile this story with the fact that I didn't know anything about reincarnation. I wasn't interested in it. And anytime I heard the word, it had a connotation of something like voodoo. And that doesn't.
Right.
Now, you can cure ignorance, and I was just blissfully ignorant. So my reconciliation with this took years, but essentially I was taught as a Christian, I grew up in a Methodist church, that our souls go on forever. But no one can tell anyone exactly what happens. The book of Revelation doesn't reveal much other than a bunch of mysteries. And I'm not attacking anything. I'm just saying that my level of understanding was below zero.
Did that take you to, we have like a pop culture version of reincarnation. We have the Dalai Lama and the Buddhist ideas behind it. We have the Christian ideas behind it. It seems like it's all out there. But there is the strange part of it where science gets involved and says, consciousness is just chemistry. You know, when we die, it's over. We achieve our place in evolution and we become fertilizer, right? and we have that clouding it. But when we have situations like with the Dalai Lama or with James, isn't that enough for science to back up and say, maybe there's something else to this?
Well, there's things that I've read and a little bit more. The book itself and the experiences led me in a whole path. And I joke about this with a couple of groups that I belong to. First of all, the Edgar Cayce organization. I've spoken in Virginia Beach several times at their headquarters. I facilitate a Search for God group, which is part of something that the Edgar Cayce organization endorses and supports. I belong to other groups where we talk about our enlightenment, our soul growth. And there's tons of information out there that's anecdotal. And in many cases, science advances through anecdotal information, and then they determine a pattern out of it. And what I've read is that there are some groups of scientists studying that phenomena, and they're saying something happens. There's a continuity of energy. All right, if energy is conserved, I'm going to claim that there's an energy to my soul, and that energy is conserved. And what happens with it when my soul leaves this body is part of an eternal journey that takes us to different places. And James once said, when Andrea asked him, where is heaven? And he said, it's right here.
Take me back. That's a very interesting point.
Yeah.
And that's where you are today. And I'm fascinated with that. Yeah. James today is 26 years old. Let's go back 27 years ago. Did you think like that before James was born?
No way. That wasn't. I don't think I ever really thought about reincarnation in any serious or unserious way, anything that made fun of it. It was something that I just didn't think had any validity, that I wasn't going to pay any attention to it. And I was just never in many places where I can ever recall hearing about reincarnation.
Oh, turn off your computer sounds. Yeah, we can't do that throughout the show. I remember.
Hold on, I'm navigating.
Okay, that's okay. I remember the reincarnation of. Trying to think. Hold on. The reincarnation of Peter Proud. I remember that movie when I was a kid, and that movie probably came out. Let's see here. Let's see if I can pull this up. What year? 1974.
Oh wow! Yeah.
Okay, so I would have been 10 years old. And that was like one of the first. Now, even though that's Hollywood and everything else, it certainly addressed what reincarnation was. And now let's go back. Now, we went back 27 years ago. Now, let's go to when James was born. Was there anything on that day? I'm a parent. I know what that first day is like. Anything different? Did anything feel out of the ordinary?
There was one thing, and I have a photo of it. James, my wife Andrea, delivered via cesarean section. He was premature. She was suffering from the precursors of preeclampsia, so they decided to move ahead more quickly. And when he was born, when he was pulled out of the womb, his arm was reaching up, and I have a picture of that. It's like it was like he was reaching for life.
Huh.
And it was something that stuck in my mind and still sticks in my mind when I think about this story, that it was like I'm back. And that was a palpable feeling I had at that moment when I saw it occurring. I didn't think anything of it, but it had that kind of impact. And then there was one movie I can recall. I think it was called The Sixth Sense.
Right.
And that had an impact on me because it caused me to ponder, well, how does that happen? Is it ESP? Is it energy somewhere? How can people figure this stuff out? And then as the book was published and I began to engage with organizations like Edgar Cayce, I spoke at the Organization of Near-Death Experiences up, I think it was Northwestern University. And there were large groups of people that were paying attention to the subject. And I said, well, wait a minute. These are intelligent, rational people. What path are they on? And I'm here and I've discovered that there is no coincidence. We can get into that if we have time. But I felt at some point or another, and this also includes the fact that James said he picked Andrea and I to be his parents, that I got picked because there was something about me that would lead him into this life.
Right.
It's called soul planning.
Yeah. And we're going to circle back to that. That is such an interesting part of this journey. Now, when I look back and I think about my daughter Nicole, what she was doing when she was 2. Okay, yeah, walking, talking a little bit, and things. But at that age, I know what my daughter Nicole, who's 28 now, 29, born in 95. She is so intelligent today, right? And I always thought that about her when she was very young. She had a vocabulary. I was like, man, I hit the jackpot here. I can't mess this up as a parent. She ended up doing all the right things, going to school and the thing, just a perfect child. Right. And so when James, when all this started at around the age of 2, these kind of memories surfacing like that,
Right.
just how did you take it? And what was the first? I know that you took him out to a couple of things, but what was the first indication when you stepped back and went, okay, wait a minute?
He had an inordinate interest in airplanes right from being an infant. We were living in Dallas, and we were in one of the approach areas at the airport, DFW airport. And it didn't matter where he was and what he was doing, whether it was in the backyard or he'd hear an airplane in the house, he'd run out into the yard and look up at it and point. And I thought, well, that was unusual. And because of that interest in airplanes, some of the very first toys he got were little wooden airplanes with little propellers on them, and he started to crash them into the coffee table. So airplane crash on fire. Those were some of the very first things. It was play. When he would get into the car, he went through this ritual where he would pull his arms over like he was putting on a seatbelt, and he'd go to his head and he'd play with it like he was putting something on. And we didn't know what it was. And then there were other things, like I was traveling quite a bit at that point. And he'd be going to the airport with us. And I think it was one time we were going with his aunt, Jennifer, she was going to fly back to Dallas from here. And he's told her, airplane crash on fire. So those were some things that we thought were strange. And but it was when the nightmares started with some frequency, and he started to be able to articulate what was going on. That was scary. It was scary enough to the both of us, to my wife and I, that she consulted with a local doctor, and he said, well, he's just having night terrors. Well, I have 4 other children from a previous marriage, and they would have a nightmare every once in a while, but they weren't doing something 4, 5, or 6 nights a week.
Right.
And he started to then describe things like, well, what's happening? He said, my airplane's on fire. I can't get out. And then there was one night, it was a discussion about, well, what happened to your plane? He said, well, it got shot in the engine. And it was when he was going to sleep, he would get into this, when you're going off to sleep and you're half asleep and half awake and you're in that dreamy state, he would start to just extraneously talk about it. But as he got older and more defined with his thinking, he would then say, well, airplane crash on fire, little man can't get out. So what happened to your plane? Well, it got shot in the engine. And then one night it was, well, who shot your plane? And he said, the Japanese. And it was, well, how did you know it was the Japanese? And he goes, the Big Red Sun. And then he started this, well, what kind of plane did you fly? A Corsair. And he was just 2 years old.
Right.
And
the quote that I'm going to read you here from James, again, 2.5 years old. He says, Mama, before I was born, I was a pilot, and my airplane got shot in the engine and it crashed in the water, and that's how I died. That, as a parent, what's your next step? Are you thinking he's got to get to a doctor? There's something going on here. He's seen something. And he's traumatized. But what's your thoughts as a parent at this point?
Well, at that point we were lost, and we didn't really know what to do. We were mystified by it, and my view on this was something from beyond us was being revealed through him. As a matter of fact, I did a piece about 3 years ago called "The Great Beyond Revealed." And it's about James's story, and it goes through a lot of the documentation. Matter of fact, the slide show that you have was done for that presentation, and it's on Prime and on Vimeo. But all of those things that he was saying, it was like, there's nowhere he could have gotten that information from. while I was a kind of a history buff and was interested in some things about history, he wasn't sitting watching anything that I might have watched. He was a small baby. And then it was the one night, the bellwether kind of night that started to really solidify this. And then there's a short anecdote after that, is as he was going to sleep, he'd start to talk about this. So Andrea came down the hallway and said, listen, James is talking about this. So come and listen to him. So I got there and I said, well, gee, James, where did your airplane come from? And he said, a boat. And when he said that, I said, well, he was talking about getting shot down by the Japanese in his airplane. And he spoke about a Corsair at that point. So I knew enough about that to know, well, if his airplane came from a boat, I said, I just took a flyer. I said, does your boat have a name? And he said, yes, Natoma. And I looked at him and I said, oh, that sounds Japanese to me. And he looked at me like I had a hole in my head. He turned his head up and he says, it was an American.
Now, this, I want everybody to understand, this reveal came from James in the year 2000. This is not from 1960, not from 1970. This is in the year 2000. We are now in 2024. This is when James was 2 to 2.5 years old, and today he's 26. This is all recent stuff, and this is a modern case.
That's right.
So because of everything, you have access to information, and you are able to start doing some research. And the first thing that I would do, is go and see if there is a Natoma.
That's right.
And now, before we get there,
right,
there are like 4 or 5 different possibilities that I'm sure you're asking yourself.
Right.
He's watched a movie. There's a neighbor that was in World War II that he's talking to. He's picking up conversations when we take him places in public, maybe a museum. It's fantasy. It's being channeled to him from space.
Right.
It's a past life. All of these possibilities are there, and of course, there's the possibility that you and your wife are remembering this wrong, and maybe you guys influenced him as well. Yeah. That anybody would try to look at this. Is it us? Did we say something to him? Do we have books out? All of these are questions that need to be answered, right?
Yes, and yeah, it was both mystifying and it was scary.
Sure.
But the primary concern that I had was for his welfare, his psychological, emotional being, because whatever this baggage was, it was there. There was something palpable there because of all of these things that were happening. So on that night, and I think there's a reference to it in the stuff that you showed me from Jim Tucker, but I went online. I said, what the hell? Natoma? I had never heard the word before. Well, there's a Natoma Lake. There's a place in Canada called Natoma Bay. It's on the western coast of Canada between Vancouver and Alaska. And actually, as I started to look, there was also a Natoma Hotel. There were a bunch of things called Natoma. Well, down around hit 100, I came across the Dictionary of American Naval Fighting Ships, and it was a history of USS Natoma Bay, CVE 62. And I pulled that up on August 27th, 2000. And the only way I know that is because there was a number on the bottom of the page that showed that was the date.
Right.
And I said, what? And I read it. I'm going, fought in the Pacific, fought in 8 or 9 major battles.
And it turned out to be a carrier.
A carrier,
yeah. And so now let's go back to James's statement. And again, he's 2.
Yes, right.
That just blows my mind.
That's right.
My plane took off from a boat.
Yep.
The Natoma, and you turn around and you look it up, and now I get goosebumps just thinking about it. But what went through your mind when you find out that the Natoma Bay was an actual U.S. Navy ship that fought in the Pacific and was a carrier?
I was dumbfounded that the hair on the back of my neck still stands up.
Sure.
Okay? My brain melted. I could have poured my brains back into my ear. I didn't know what to say. I walked out and showed it to Andrew, and I said, "Damn, what is up?" And then, that was the first major piece of information that was a revelation that was tied to some hard fact. Yeah, there's aircraft carriers, the Japanese and Corsairs and stuff like that. Matter of fact, one guy, I think it was on the University of Rochester, was on the ABC primetime the first time we were on it. And he said, well, maybe he's getting together with his little buddies and talking to what?
Well,
Okay.
I'm going to be honest with you, Bruce. You kind of have to ask those questions.
Oh, yeah.
You absolutely do, because when you have facts,
yeah,
and then you have to get to the truth, and the truth is somewhere behind those facts.
That's right. And I didn't know what to do other than this. And then the next piece that was important was, well, who's in your dream? Me. He would say that. And so there was this one night about, maybe a little bit more than a month later, I said, well, who else is in your dream? And he said, a guy named Jack. I said, Jack. I said, did Jack have another name? And he said, Larson. Well, again, it threw me into a tizzy. And for the longest time, I thought the person that he was talking about in terms of remembering was Jack.
That he was this Jack Larson.
That's right.
Right. And now I would go there too.
And I didn't have anything else to go on.
Sure.
But then what I did is I did some research and found an American Battle Monuments Commission, which talks about who's buried or who's on memorial walls in all the different wars that they've kept track of and where they're located. And I found a list of about 140 different people named Larson who were killed in World War II. And I started to try to match that up. There was a Jack Larson, but he was a sergeant. He was in the Army, so it couldn't have been him. But I had names that matched something he said, and I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know where else to look. I was really lost at that point. I said, something is happening. Something's coming from the great beyond out there. And it scared me. I was scared about it. I was concerned about him and his well-being. But I didn't know what else I could do.
So did you find out if Jack Larson... Now, here's the other part for me. President John Kennedy, right? Okay.
Yeah.
But people call him Jack.
Yep.
Right? Did you go down that road too as well? Maybe it's not Jack, maybe it's John.
Well, I found some John Larsons in the list. I've used 2 different spellings of the name, one Larsen and Larson. One is Swedish, and I think is the other Danish, the way it gets spelled. I think the E is Swedish. But I started to look both ways in terms of anyone named Larson. And like I said, there's about 140 people. with a mixture of names. Larson, some of them there's several Jameses, there's several Johns, there's a whole bunch of different names. Joseph on that list, and I still have that list from when I originally printed it in October of 2000, which
now
is shortly after he said it.
Right. Now, so at this point, he has already referenced the little man. Was he the little man? Was Jack the little man? Or was the little man somebody else? Or was that James?
I didn't know. I didn't know where the information was going to come from, because I didn't know, I know about how to do research because of my schooling, but where to begin to look? Where are the primary sources I need to go to? I don't want secondary sources. I don't want editorial. I want primary sources. Like
you need to go to one of those veteran groups where everybody's wearing USS Natoma Bay hats.
And that's what wound up happening.
Oh, okay.
Because in about another month and a half, my father was in the Marine Corps at the end of World War II, and he belonged to a China Marine reunion group. And early that October, they came through Lafayette and visited with us, and he went to San Antonio for a reunion. Well, I figured, what am I going to get him for Christmas? And I was always trying to find something that was some sort of Marine Corps memorabilia. To make a long story short, I bought a book about the Battle of Iwo Jima, and I was going to give it to him for Christmas. And I'd gotten it, and during the Thanksgiving break, I was sitting on my steps going down to our family room in my house, and I was paging through the book saying, well, maybe if I like it, I'll get my own copy. And James came sauntering up, because we had this ritual of watching cartoons or Teletubbies on a Saturday morning. So he came up and plopped down on my lap. He said, well, you watch cartoons. And I said, well, I'm looking at this book for Poppy. And I started the page through it, and it had pictures. And about page 14 or 15, there was a picture of the island of Iwo Jima and a little map drawing. And he, without hesitating, he pointed to that picture and he said, Daddy, that's when my plane got shot down.
Was it this map here?
No.
Okay. All right.
No.
But we'll circle back to that.
Yeah.
Okay. So now he's pointing at Iwo Jima and he says, now you've got tools now. You've got stuff to act on. Right. You've got the Natoma. You've got the book. Right. You've got the little man. You've got Jack Larson. When did he first bring up James? Now his name is James, by the way, right. Which is also very. Can I ask you who named him James?
We named him James Madison Leininger after his great-great-grandfather, James Madison Scoggin, who was from Laurel, Mississippi.
I mean, what are the odds? I'm just, well, hold on. I don't want to get ahead of our skis here. Okay. So James, hold on, Bruce. When did James first mention James?
Okay. In early 2000, I guess, or 2001, he started to do drawings, violent drawings of airplanes being shot at and going up in flames. And one of the very first ones is the picture of James 3. And I looked at him and I said, by this time he had worn out a tape on the Blue Angels. And I thought maybe he was talking about being a number 3 slot pilot in the Blue Angels. I said, is that about the Blue Angels? He goes, no. He says, I'm the third James. James the third? What are you talking about? He wasn't, that's not the way he was named. He was named after his great great-grandfather, James Madison Scoggin. And then I also said, well, what are all those little dots on that picture? He said, oh, that's flak flying at me.
Wow.
Now there's a short clip on one of the ABC primetime shows that has a plane with its gun cameras on, and that's what flak looks like when it's coming at you.
I can't imagine.
Yeah, but
I just can't imagine. Okay, so let me pop this back up. Everybody, you can see down here at the on the bottom. It is signed James 3.
Yeah, and the other one is signed James 3. There's several of them, several different kinds of drawings that he did, but most of them were like this. And I'm going to say maybe 10 or 12 of them he signed James 3.
Now you've got more tools.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, so let's looking at the clock here.
Larson for a second.
What's that?
Let's go back to Jack Larson for a second, because that's
sure.
Okay. Like you were saying, it was, who was it? Who was he talking about? James. I'm the third James. What did Jack Larson have to do with this? So my father had gone to that reunion. I thought, well, gee, maybe there's a reunion group. And I did some searching online and found out that there was a reunion group. The USS Natoma Bay Reunion Group. And I got some phone numbers and I started to call. After about a week and a half, I finally got a guy on the phone named Leo Pyatt. And he asked me who I was and what I was doing. I gave him a line of BS. I didn't want to say something like, oh, my 2-year-old's telling me that he flew off your aircraft carrier. Click,
Right, of course.
A friend of mine whose uncle is talking about Natoma Bay, and I want to know a little bit more about it. He asked me if I was a veteran or whatever, because we were on the phone. And so I just started to talk to Leo. I said, well, can you tell me anything about the Battle of Iwo Jima? He said, oh, yeah. He said, I flew 36 missions there. And my heart started to race like a rabbit, because I had looked up in the action report that I had, or the history, that the ship had supported the Battle of Iwo Jima. And so we talked about a bunch of stuff. What kind of airplanes were there? I asked him about Corsairs. He says there were no Corsairs. So that mystified me a little bit, because he said he flew a Corsair. So I just screwed up my courage. And I said, can you tell me anything about a guy named Jack Larson? He said, oh, yeah, I remember Jack. He flew off one day and I never saw him again. And he had to call me back to the phone because I went dead silent.
Yeah, right.
And at that point, I got connected. It took 2 years, but I wound up going to a Natoma Bay reunion. And during that period of time, I thought, well, maybe it was Jack Larson. Maybe Jack was the person that he's still talking about.
Right.
When I got to the reunion, I asked the ship historian, a guy named John DeWitt, I said, can you tell me anything about some of these people? Because I developed a list of 18 people that had been killed serving aboard Natoma Bay. And that was from another website. Okay. I said, can you tell me about Jack? When Jack was killed? He says, is Jack dead? I said, what do you mean? He said, well, he's a member of the reunion group. He lives in northern Arkansas. He gave me his name and address, and I called him that night.
You called Jack Larson?
I called Jack. I said, Jack, I'm at the reunion. I'd like to talk to you about your experiences. Do you mind? Well, 2 weeks later, I was in his house. And
Man, this is getting good. I need some popcorn. I mean, I'm all of us are blessed that you have the determination, right? But all of these dominoes are right up in front of you.
That's correct.
Right. And they're all starting to fall, right? One after another. So just that Jack Larson is alive, that's one thing. But two, to get him on the phone, that must have freaked you out. But 2 weeks later, you're sitting and talking to him. Yep. What did you guys talk about?
Well, I asked about his experiences. Now, in that process, I'd also received a lot of information from John DeWitt. about the history of VC 81, which was the squadron that James flew in and that Jack Larson flew in, and the description about the Battle of Iwo Jima, and the description about what happened to James M. Huston Jr., who was the only member of the squadron that was killed during the Battle of Iwo Jima.
Now, okay, let's back up, because you've got the book on Iwo Jima.
Right.
Is the Natoma Bay in the book?
No, I don't think it's mentioned in the book. There is a history of the U.S. Navy in World War II written by Dr. Martin.
Not interested in that.
No.
What I'm interested in is, could James, your son, have thumbed through that book, saw the Natoma Bay and James Huston's name?
No.
Exactly.
No.
Very. This is just crazy town at this point. So back to your conversation with Jack. What did? So now you're zeroing in on James because he was the only pilot killed in action at Iwo Jima from the Natoma Bay. There was only one, right?
And his name was James M. McCready. James M. Huston Jr. James McCready Huston Jr.
Yeah, Junior, which means he was number 2.
That's right. And
how long did it take you to process James 3?
Well, when I spoke with Andrea, my wife, that night, I said, there was a guy killed named James M. Huston Jr. He says, that's got to be it. That's got to be it. I said, and I pulled back because I wanted to see definitive information that I got. And it described him being shot down and landing in the water, crashing in the water during an attack on Iwo Jima, which was about 130 or 40 miles away from Iwo Jima, so they could destroy shipping in the harbor there, because so the Japanese could not resupply the island of Iwo Jima when the battle was being fought.
What happened next?
Well, at that point, I just kept going. I got 9 rolls of microfilm from the Natoma Bay Association. I copied 9 rolls of microfilm. It's over 4,000 pages, 1 page at a time. It took me 3 weeks. And I read every page, and I read everything I could find out about James M. Huston Jr., including the fact that in one of the action reports, which you have a picture of, that one picture of Iwo Jima is a page from the action report 81. There was an aircraft action report filed after every battle where aircraft flew a mission of some attacking or defending purpose. And it showed Huston getting shot down. And then also, when I went to see Jack Larson, he said, I flew on that mission. And you can see Jack Larson's name on that diagram.
It's right here. There's Larson here and Huston right here, or Huston, Huston.
That's right. And then what happened is they flew another attack, and that lower picture is the second run that they made, and Huston's gone. But no one knew that Huston got shot down. No one in the squadron saw it. So it was that he was probably shot down because he just never came back. And that next morning, Jack was, he actually stayed at his house. And I stayed at his house. And he said, you were having breakfast the next morning. And so he was asking me about all that. And he said, well, why are you so interested? I said, well, it involves something that my son is talking about. And he said, well, wait a minute. And he goes out into the garage and comes back in this with dusty little old bag, and he pulls out this helmet. This is an aircraft pilot's helmet from World War II. And he said, this is the helmet I was wearing the day we attacked Iwo Jima. And he gave it to me for James. And I have pictures of James wearing this, playing in it.
Well, did James have a reaction when he first saw it?
He just played with it. He had set up a little cockpit in my office in the closet, where he would be in there and he'd shoot the Japs, and he'd come tumbling out of the thing. He had a little backpack thing he had kind of rigged up, a little shopping bag. He'd fall out on the thing. He said, "What happened?" I said, "Why did you fall?" He said, "I didn't fall. I bailed out. I got shot." And he had all of that kind of playing out what was happening.
Now, can we go back to the Corsair part about this? Because he had, and this is very, 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 very specific information here. So he kept saying Corsairs, but the planes that were flown off of the Natoma Bay were FM2s.
That's right. There were Wildcats and then TBM Avengers, and it was called VC-81. It was a composite squadron. It was formed with two types of aircraft. And that was mystifying. As a matter of fact, that was the nail that I was driving into the wall to hang my hat on, and said, this is just a bunch of coincidence. Because by this time, the subject of past lives had been brought up by my wife and by her mother. And the first word in chapter 10 of my book, or of our book, is bullshit. That was where the issue of reincarnation came up. And I said, no way. That's not happening here. I might as well have gone down to the beach and told the tide not to come in.
Right.
Okay. You know, and then it was shortly after that reunion that we were cleaning up after Hurricane Lily, and that was where he hopped up on my lap, breaking in the yard. And as I said, you're such a good son. I said, I love you so much. He looked up at me and he said, Daddy, I said, I knew you'd be a good daddy when I picked you. And I went silent. I said, pick me? I said, yeah, I picked you and Mommy. I said, me and Mommy? I said, where were we? So we were in a big pink hotel in Hawaii. I said, well, what were we doing? He said, you were sitting on the beach at night eating dinner. We had gone there for our 5th anniversary. It was 7 to 8 weeks before James was conceived. And he described exactly where we stayed and what we were doing, and where we stayed and what we were doing is exactly what he described. But he picked us to be his parents.
How old was he when he said this?
Let me think. It was 2002.
So he's 3.
He would have been, yeah, he would have been 4. No, 2002, he would have been 4. He was born in 98.
At what point do you, I understand your wife, and I think you said your mother-in-law, her mom, brought up past lives. At what point did you start to consider a past life or reincarnation?
Well, at that point, my wife got a book from her mother. It was called Children's Past Lives by a woman named Carol Bowman, who did therapy work on children with past life memories. And when she got it to me and showed it, to me, I said, oh, bullshit.
Right.
But I'm thinking about all this stuff. I secreted it away from the house, took it to my office and started to read it. And I'm going, oh my God, because she was giving stories of other children with very specific memories. And so at that point, it was something like this had to have happened somehow or another. And that was where I started this wrestling thing with my soul, where I was just, how am I going to reconcile this with my Christian faith And like I said in the beginning, I signed the book, Nurture Your Soul. It's on an eternal journey with God's blessing. Okay. It was something like this had to have happened. I don't know how it could have happened. I don't know why it happened. I'm still not sure why it happened, but it was happening. And then the thing with the Corsair, Andrea helped me quite a bit because I was so busy doing consulting that she started to try to find information out about other members of the squadron that had been killed. And in one of those discussions, she spoke with James M. Huston Jr.'s sister, Ann Barron. And Ann Barron sent a bunch of pictures to us that I scanned and made copies of all of them. I have a whole album of them. And in one of those pictures, it was a picture of James M. Huston Jr. standing in front of a Corsair. He had flown in an experimental squadron that test flew the Corsair in Lake Michigan for carrier use because they couldn't use the Corsair at first. They had to do some re-engineering of it. And he was in that squadron that test flew the Corsairs. And when they got to the Pacific, that squadron was disbanded, and he was then assigned to Natoma Bay, DC-81, along with other members of the squadron. So at that point, I had to pull the nail out of the wall. That's it. Game's over. This is reincarnation, or whatever we want to call it. I still am uncomfortable with the word reincarnation because our souls have a continuity through eternity. And in this body at this time, my soul is occupied. But when my soul leaves this body, it may come back again. And
let's talk about choosing.
Yeah.
I always thought, now this is just me, and please, I'm not by any means an educated authority on any of this, but I thought it was random. You know what I mean? You come back as a dog. You come back as a frog. You've got some debt to pay. You come back, and for me, if I've always had a fear of that. But this, did you start to research this? And were there other cases where children chose their parents?
Well, there's a very well-known case that's been, I think, also covered in the Netflix that James was part of in terms of surviving death that was put on 2 years ago. Lou Gehrig. There's a large body of work out there about reincarnation that's well documented. The issue, the way I look at this, you come back as a dog or whatever. There's an issue of what's called soul development. And very broadly, a piece of the Creator we're taught to believe is in each of us. And so that soul development has to do with developing to a level that you don't maybe need to come back, that you've developed that level of awareness that because as we grow up, we learn, we become aware. There's several books out on soul planning. John Van Auken with the Edgar Cayce organization has written quite a bit on the subject. Edgar Cayce spoke about it. There are a number of different organizations out there that embrace the idea, and it has to do with we have an opportunity to grow. Now, some of that growth also may involve learning a hard lesson. Sometimes experience is the best teacher.
Did it force you, Bruce? Just have to ask you. Did it force you to analyze yourself too, as well?
Oh, I'm in a process of doing that. I've been doing that now for years.
Right.
In a very deep process of doing that right now. So I can get some things clear in my mind, because I don't think that I'm sitting here and it's a coincidence. And
Yeah, that's right. No. There are no coincidences, my friend. Let me ask
some of that stuff later, because I have a long list where this is beyond coincidence. That's why I'm saying that the great beyond revealed on Amazon Prime, there's just too many coincidences. It's like getting hit by lightning 8 times. It can't be a coincidence. You're a lightning.
Yeah, that's right. Before James is 26 today. We're going to take a break here and come back, but he's 26 today. And does he still recall, and has he recalled more, or has he left this behind him?
He is squarely in this life, living his life as what he wanted to do starting from a small child. The only thing I'm going to tell you, because his story has interfered with some of his success in the military, but he's in the military and he's doing very well, and he's living what he was made for.
It's just absolutely amazing. Bruce, let's take our break right here. Our guest tonight, Bruce Leininger. We're talking about the case of James Leininger and reincarnation. We'll be right back. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to get your alerts and access to over 2,000 videos. Click that subscribe button right now.
My job is not to preach. My job is to take you on this journey.
In a state of passion, nothing negative can happen.
That it's the moons of those planets that would have life.
Sometimes I see, these energies also in your field.
It is our passion and our pleasure.
Go to jimmychurchradio.com and get the Fade to Black official podcast. 2,000 episodes, all of them commercial free for just $2 a month. This is Jimmy Church. Please visit and explore Egypt this October 3rd through the 14th, 2024 with Billy, Elizabeth, myself, and very special guest and the #1 podcaster in the world, Sean Kelly. It's simple to do. Just go to forbiddenknowledge.com and click on upcoming tours, or click on the link below. We'll see you there. Watch Into the Vortex on Gaia TV. It's Fade to Black for the screen. Simple to do. Go to Gaia.com, search Jimmy Church, or click on the link below. Follow Fade to Black on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Get all of the show updates every single day. It's now called X, but who cares? How you doing? Jimmy Church here. Special announcement. Get your Fade to Black t-shirts. That's right. Help support the show. Help support everything that we do over here. We've got 2 t-shirts. We've got 2 ways to get them. And right now, if you get a Game Changer membership for a limited time, you will get Fade to Black blend coffee with your Game Changer membership. That's right. We have 2 t-shirts. We have the original, the classic Fade to Black t-shirt. You know you want one. Post a picture. Send it to us. We'll put it in our Fade to Black gallery. And we've got the new official Fade to Black t-shirt drawn by Michael Oming. 2 t-shirts, 2 ways to get them. Get yours today. Everything is in stock. Everything gets autographed. Everything includes shipping, and you're going to get a tracking number. And with a Game Changer membership, you get an email to me. You get unlimited commercial-free downloads of the show. Those are uploaded every single night after the show to the website. So don't delay. Get your Fade to Black t-shirt today. Go Backley Tappy. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and become a Fadernaut. Get a membership. That's right. Everything is commercial free. You have access to downloads, and you get to call yourself a Fadernaut. River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon Wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com. All right, welcome back, Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Bruce Leininger is with us. We are talking about the case of his son, James Leininger, who at the age of 2 to 2.5 started to recall a past life. And through the research of his father, Bruce, and his wife, his mom, and others, the story started to reveal itself about a pilot on the USS Natoma Bay, a carrier for planes that fought in the Pacific, but specifically at the Battle of Iwo Jima. And the only pilot killed on that mission was a James Huston Jr. Some say Houston. I say Huston, south of Huston Street. I always think of that. Bruce, did you reach out to the family of James Huston Jr.?
Yes. Yeah, I did. I wrote a nice letter to Ann, got the information from my wife. I sent her a letter I had as much information as I had about what happened to Jimmy, because she always called him Jimmy. So because when I first spoke with her, her father had actually gone to a couple of reunions in the early 60s looking for information about what happened to his son, and he was never able to get anything. Really hard. As a matter of fact, that's one of the coincidences of this thing that makes it what makes me feel like I'm part of a plan. But anyway, we reached out to them. She embraced James. They spoke often. They exchanged Christmas gifts. He called her Annie, And the only person that ever called her Annie was her brother Jim Huston. He described the details of their family, that he had 2 older sisters, Ruth and Annie, and they were each 4 years older than he was, which was exactly correct. He also described some of the intimate details of the family. The father had some issues with alcohol and had to go into, and he described it. He described his father's illness.
The family, as they started to hear why you were contacting them, what did they think?
They embraced it. As a matter of fact, when we found out that we were getting this traction and attention, and people wanted to know about it, we were being taped for ABC Primetime. It was the first taping. We were on ABC Primetime a couple times. And Chris Cuomo was the person that was the reporter that was there with us. And we were taping, and we had told the families, and we told people, look, we're going to be on TV. So we were having to I had to tell Leo Pyatt. When I told Leo Pyatt this is about reincarnation, he goes, oh, we're studying that in our church. He's a Catholic. With Ann Barron, we were sitting there just getting ready to do another episode of taping, and a box came to the door. Ann Barron sent some things to James because she believed in what was happening. She said, this was Jimmy's, this is yours. And one of those things is this little bust of George Washington that Jim Huston used to sit on his desk. And when we handed it to James, he got up and ran down the hallway and came back. And I said, where did you go with this little statue of George Washington? He said, I went and put it on my desk. There was also a little plane with it. It was a model of a Corsair that we used to hang in the ready rooms, and it was part of Jim Huston's final effects. And he took that, and the cameraman was just taping us going through this. And just as he said, this smells like an aircraft carrier, the tape ran out on the camera. I said, what do you mean an aircraft carrier? I smelled, and it had this oily, smoky smell. It had been in a box somewhere in an attic for years. James has that with him. He took that with him when he left the house to join the military. But the family embraced it. The men that I spoke to embraced it, including Jack Larson, including a guy named Bob Greenwall. And some of those things are, this is where it's beyond coincidence. These people we met, the things that they talked about, the things that they experienced, the things that they shared factually, just, there's no way it could be chance. It's beyond coincidence.
The shock, how emotional was it for the family to go through? I mean, they want answers. They were looking for answers. They couldn't chase anything down. And then suddenly this surfaces. Was it emotional for them to go through? And well, I mean, that's the real question. And I understand embracing it, right, but it must have been very tough to go through.
Yeah. The way I'm going to say it is Anne and her daughter, Leslie, were very receptive to what we had done because we were able to give them a lot of information about what happened to in Leslie's case, her uncle. Okay. In terms of some of the letters and some of the things that they wrote, I can briefly read some things here that Ann Barron wrote. This was a picture that she sent James of herself. It was a painting of herself that was very much like a small painting that James had done of himself when he was 2. This was of her. That was of James when he was 2. And she sent this to him because he asked her about this picture. They were on the phone one night around Christmas time, and this was in her attic. This is the only picture of her that her mother painted that was like the one that she had painted of James. And the little note that goes with it says, "I do hope that this picture is the one you asked me for. It is the only one done of me by my mother. I am sorry to be so long in sending it. These past weeks have been very hectic. I hope you like it. With my love, Anne."
Did you say earlier that when James met the family, he called her Annie?
Oh yeah, they were pals. When they met at a reunion, as a matter of fact, I think the book has one of those pictures in it. But they were chummy. Here's this 85-year-old woman talking to a 6-year-old.
Right. And James was the only one, James too, was the only one to call her Annie, right?
Yes.
Am I understanding that correctly?
The person that ever called me Annie was my brother Jimmy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, as things move on, you wrote the book when James was 11 years old. You didn't write the book when he was 2. If you were, excuse me for being so direct on this point, but if you were trying to capitalize on this, you would have done this when he was 2.5 years old. You wouldn't have waited and you know what I mean, seized the moment. Right. and wrote the book 10 years before that. Right. Am I being too direct in that assessment?
Oh, no, actually, that's a very good point, and I'm glad you're bringing it up. For the longest time, we wanted to protect James. We wanted to make sure he was safe, that this wasn't going to damage him in any long-term way. So we were very guarded about who we would talk to. As a matter of fact, if you called Jim Tucker tried for years to talk to me, and I just didn't want to do it because I didn't want to let the information out and be misused. Okay, it was more or less, I wanted to protect James. And then it got to the point where we came back from Iwo Jima, the whole issue of its visibility had become global. And I said, okay, if anybody's going to tell the story, it's going to be the people with all the facts. We're not going to do this conjecture. And I certainly appreciate skeptics and to some degree even cynics, because I was a skeptic. And that's one of the reasons why Jim Tucker came to the house. But from that point of view, it was, if we're going to tell the story, we're going to tell the story, and this is the story. These are the facts. And I can back it up with documents, military documents, interview information, anecdotal information people talk about, things like one goofy little thing was my wife didn't make meatloaf very often, and James was probably about 3, and she made some meatloaf, and he ate it like he hadn't eaten in a week. And I looked at him and I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I love meatloaf." He said, "We used to have it on the Toma Bay."
Well, I love meatloaf.
Well,
now, who doesn't love meatloaf, Bruce?
No, I love it. But the whole idea here, the anecdotal information is, we used to have this on the Toma Bay.
Yeah. That's just crazy to me. and looking back, did the nightmares stop?
Yes. I'm going to say that they probably stopped probably by the end of 2000, going into 2001. When he started to draw those pictures, he would do those drawings almost every day.
Mm-hmm.
So playing it out, and there were, I would say, there were pieces of information that he would be able to reveal. But by that time, I was on a hunt to verify a lot of what he had said. So it was more, I was obsessed with it. And actually, my wife was trying to hold me back. She said, "We have enough information." I said, "No, we don't. I have to have the answers. I want to nail down all four corners of this carpet." And I was determined to continue on until I got to the point that I felt satisfied.
And how are you today? Are you satisfied?
Yes.
You think that it's been resolved? And the reason why I asked about the nightmare stopping, the exposure of this and James being able to talk about it and express it was all that I'm speculating here,
Yeah.
but was all that was needed for the nightmares to stop.
Well, there were other things that happened when we went to the Natoma Bay reunion as a family in 2004 to San Antonio. And by then everyone knew about it. And so it was an opportunity for James to be around these people. And there were certain behaviors he had. He'd have breakfast with these guys. And one time we were in the pool, he was a little puzzled looking. And he goes, "Why is everybody so old?" He was remembering something different. And then there was this one incident with a guy named Bob Greenwall, and Bob Greenwall also flew in this Corsair squadron. And we were on TV, and his son contacted me the next day because I'm not hiding. It's easy to find me. And he said, I called my dad because his father, Bob Greenwall, served on Natoma Bay. So I spoke with Bob Greenwall. As it turned out, Bob Greenwall was a squadron mate on VC or VF 301, which was the Corsair squadron. So he came to the reunion. James was going up to his room to take a nap with my wife, and Bob Greenwald was coming down in the elevator. Bob looked at him because he'd seen him on TV, and he bent down and looked at James and says, "Bet you don't know who I am." Now, James didn't even know I'd spoken to Bob Greenwald. Okay. James looked up and he says, "You're Bob Greenwald."
No, he didn't. Did he really?
He said, "You're Bob Greenwald." So we asked him later, "How did you know that was Mr. Greenwald?" He said, "I remembered his voice."
Man. The work that you're doing today, when you hear from others that are questioning their own, themselves and their own reality, how much of it lines up with your own experience with James?
Well, in some cases, I speak to people about that subject. My view is I want to be open to who people are, that if there's something that I can do to help them, like I do recruiting, and I like to help people get to the right place, the right job, doing the right thing. That's their passion. So my only, let's say, continuing activity is to be as determined to help those other people as I am in terms of having helped my son. Being his father, going through all this and demystifying it and putting it down as a record of something important that happened that he was a part of. I think about it as a very privileged legacy of involvement.
Well, what about ages? Is this common out there? I've seen some of the research papers on it, but how common is it for a young child who is just learning to speak, right, and vocabulary to recall a past life like this? How common is it?
Well, I think it's much more common. You know, how many people talk about their child's imaginary friends? It's a fairly common thing.
You know, I thought about that earlier. That's one of the things that I missed out on as a parent. I didn't have imaginary friends when I was young either. I didn't. I always heard the stories, but I was so excited as a parent. I wanted my daughter to come in and say, well, you know, I was just talking to my friend. I'm just having tea, you know, in my bedroom with my friend. I never had that. I didn't get that experience. I missed out on it.
Yeah. Well, as far as that's concerned, James had such things occurring. Before we moved to Texas and before we moved to Louisiana from Texas, he would get up in the middle of the night and we'd go up to his room because we'd hear him jabbering with somebody. It was like he was having a conversation with somebody. We couldn't understand anything he was saying, but he was talking to someone. And then when I took him to and I'm just linking things very quickly, when I took him to the Cavanaugh Museum and he saw those aircraft and he was just mesmerized by them, he wouldn't leave the room where the World War II aircraft were. No matter what I tried to do, that was really an impetus where it unlocked something in him. The whole issue of imaginary friends, I'll give you two quickly. One is I came home. It was my birthday, and we went out. Or it was the day after my birthday. We went out for a short walk. I said, I had a rough day today. I said, it's a beautiful sky. I said, just look up there. He said, oh, this is Billy's with me. Billy's here. And I look up, who's Billy? He's always my friend. Well, later on, we'll learn who Billy Peeler was. And then he looked at me, he said, look at Dad. He said, every day is like a carrier landing.
Oh, man.
If you walk away from it, you're okay. What? And then we were in a Japanese restaurant one night, and my wife and I love sushi. So he had a great broad palate. He loves all kinds of food. And he's sitting there and we're eating sushi and he's giggling. I said, what are you giggling about? He said, Billy's here with me and he's mad at me because we're eating Japanese food.
How old was he when he's saying stuff like this?
He was
3, 4?
He was 4 or 5, yeah.
At what point did he stop discussing this, or did he ever stop?
Well, the bellwether event where it never really surfaced again was when we went to Iwo Jima and we had the memorial service at the spot where Jim Houston's plane was shot down.
Right.
Up until then, every drawing that he ever made about airplanes was violent. When we got home, when we got back to the States, we had to go and do some taping with Ann Barron. And when we did that taping with Ann Barron, we ate at a little restaurant along the coast near Half Moon Bay. And he had I'm trying to find a picture. It's in the book too, I think. He drew a picture on the back of the child's menu, and the picture was one that was peaceful. And both my wife and I feel that he left something very palpable there when we had that memorial service. The Japanese taping crew was in tears because they saw his emotion, and we feel that he left it there. And after that, there was, I'm looking for the last drawing he made of what we're talking about. It was very peaceful. It was,
I think let me pop this image up. There's James Huston Jr. right here, and what was your son James 3? What was his reaction when he saw a picture of himself? This one.
I'm not even quite sure I've ever. Well, he's had to see the picture. It was just part of his story. It was.
I mean, it's not. It's just a question. When you're looking at a picture of yourself, where there was this realization that possibly that you were no longer alive, or reincarnated, I should say.
Well, the only when there's been a lot of activity about the story that he was engaged in, he would sometimes have a flashback kind of memory of what happened to him, but it was very incidental. But he doesn't talk about it. It's like I said, he's in this life now.
Right. And how old was he when you guys did the memorial in Iwo Jima?
That was in 2000, and I think it was 2006. So he was 8 years old.
He was 8 years old, and that was it.
Yep.
That was it. He just stopped talking about it.
Yep. And he broke down. He was very emotional. There's also one or two other things that he said and did while we were there. We went up and we had an opportunity to tour the island. And we got up over the harbor and we're looking at the harbor from a distance, looking out the harbor. And he tugged on my pants and he said, "Daddy, this is where my plane flew in the day I was shot down." And if you go back to that diagram of that action report, we were standing roughly in the area where the planes flew in. It was a familiar view. As a matter of fact, it was pretty mystical for us because we went swimming in the bay. It was very mystical for me to think James is in the same water with James.
Yeah. That's heavy. That's heavy.
That was I've thought about it a lot. Matter of fact, I wrote a poem about it. Okay. It was a magical, I'm going to call it a holy event.
Sure.
A religious, spiritual event of a magnitude that I'm very fortunate to have experienced.
Now, what about yourself? And before you answer, are all of us, including myself, are all of us reincarnated? Do all of us have past lives? And have you looked into yourself?
Okay. I believe that more of us have past lives than don't. I believe it's a very common occurrence. Now, I was a fanatic. I was crazy about this thing. I'm still determined to share about the story only because it's an important thing for people to come to grips with. I have a soul. What am I doing with it? And I have put together a booklet of each man, and there was a guy that was a veteran of the Battle of Iwo Jima that lived here in town, and I gave him and his wife that thing to look at, and she was looking at this one booklet, and she goes, "What are you doing in this thing?" I said, "What are you talking about?" She said, that guy looks like you." It was one of the other guys that had been killed serving aboard Natoma Bay in the same squadron. Now, I went through a brief regression at one point at an Edgar Casey organization, and when I went into the regression, I could see I was in a ball turret the glass was breaking all around me. And then everything just went black. And when we came out of it, one of the guys looked at me and he said, his name is Paul Dresser. He said, "Are you okay?" He says, the blood has rushed out of your face. I said, "I was experiencing what I think happened to one of the guys on Atoma Bay." I don't like to talk about it. I don't like, and the reason I don't is I don't want people to think, "Oh, well, you did it too."
I know. I went through the same thing. I did. I got regressed. I didn't do a past life regression.
Well,
but
this was a group thing. And it was only like 10 or 15 minutes, but I specifically, I can still close my eyes and see what happened.
Right.
And
what you don't want, let's just call it. Let's just call it right now. You don't want people to go, "Oh, here we go, Bruce. Okay, all right. Now, Bruce, you don't want to. You don't want to be that guy."
That's right.
And I totally understand.
And to go back to the subject of, because it was the issue, because you asked that question, so I answered it. We have a soul. And in the case of reincarnation, or whatever you want to call it, I didn't like the title of the word reincarnation in the book because it conjures up certain ways of thinking.
Sure.
I think the more comfortable we become knowing that we have a soul that's eternal, well, we think because our soul's eternal, somehow or another it started with me and it goes on. But if it is eternal, eternity might mean before me.
That's right.
So be open to it. And if you're curious about having memories, like I've gotten some texts, I belong to a couple of different groups in Facebook and stuff like that. If you're having certain memories, like I had a guy call me right after we were on ABC, I think it was ABC Primetime. He was from Boston, but his last name was Landry. And he says, "I'm so glad I saw this because I was a pilot on a World War II aircraft carrier too. And I know it because I know what they look like because I was on one." He says, I was also a Navy pilot as an adult, but I had memories of doing the same thing. And my wife my wife and my family thought I was crazy. So and I'm not making any dispersions. I'm just saying what he said. He says, "Well, I'm a Catholic and it's just not something they want to discuss."
What's your idea? When does, because I think about this all the time. When does the soul start? Right? There's got to be a first version. There's got to be a 1.0. Right? And you just touched upon it. We always assume we're the first, right?
Well, that's the place where it's very difficult to be factual about it, because the only, the reason we're talking tonight is there's a lot of fact backing up what my son is claiming. And it's an incredible story, and it happens a lot. And so the issue is, yes, I think that's part of the learning process, or maybe even the acceptance process. We think, first of all, we're created. There's a creator, unless you're an atheist or in some cases agnostic, whatever most major world religions, if not all, have also talked about a creator, before time as we know it. Well, there's no way to know exactly what that is, but if we were created, my way of thinking is that God created me for a purpose. And I actually give him thanks almost daily, saying, "You're not done with me." That doesn't mean that I'm some saint, because I've got plenty of places where I could have done life better. But I'm learning and growing, because there's a realization that I have a soul, and what I do with it is important vis-a-vis other people. I'm sitting here talking to you tonight because somebody might be out there saying, gee, I wonder what I'm about. We can go through a lot of therapy and stuff like this, but the whole issue is coming to grips with what's really in your heart. You know, for the longest time, I'd never meditated. And since I started this process of journey and growth because of this, I meditate. It gets me in touch with me, nothing else. It gets me in touch with my Creator. Now, that doesn't happen all the time, but there's certain places where I feel there's a Creator for me. I'm here for a purpose, and let me do as much good as I can. Let me help other people come to grips with taking time to deal with their spiritual, the spiritual part of themselves. You know, a lot of people go to church or they do things where they're spiritually oriented. Well, what are you doing that for? You're feeding your soul. You're feeding your compassion. You're feeding your self-love. You're concerned for yourself, and then you extend it to others.
No, you might be going for bingo night though. Wednesday nights are pretty hopping. But here's another point though. For those skeptics out there about this, I think everybody, and when I say everybody, there's 8 billion people on this planet. Okay, I don't care how old you are or where you live. Everybody goes through the experience of, I've been here before.
Yeah.
But this is my first time here.
Yeah.
And you visit another country, or you visit another state, or you visit another city that you've never been to before.
Yeah.
But you have this strange feeling that you have, but there's no way to explain it away.
Yeah.
Is that a past life recollection, or is it just something that's in our DNA that stretches back? You know,
well, that's hard, and that's where we want to go to science. You know, when I was a young child, I always used to like to run a lot, and I was a very, very good competitive runner. But I would always like to go out and run at night, and there were many times where I just thought I was from a different time. I couldn't pinpoint it. I didn't have any specific memories. I just had this feeling like I'd been here before. I'd been in this earth before, that I was in this space a long time ago. It was just something that I felt. But the whole issue is then really is pondering who you are. You know, what am I about? Why do I love the people that I love?
Yeah. You know what's strange for me, Bruce? I want your opinion on this. And I've talked about this a lot on the show. I don't get vibes from the United States. The Old West, Gettysburg, Chicago, New York, San Francisco, the desert, the city, north, south. I've been to just about every state. I probably have been to every state in the northern 48. And I don't get that vibe.
Right.
But I do get it from Central and South America. I do get it from Egypt. But there's like this big gap. Don't get it from England. No, it's like really weird for me. I just don't get it. And I've been on aircraft carriers. I've been on battleships. I've been on submarines. I've done all of that. War memorials. I'm a military brat. I've been to Army base, lived on Army base. I don't get those vibes. Why do you think that is? Was I really, really good, and I didn't reincarnate for 3,000 or 4,000 years?
That's a possibility. I had the chance to speak at the ARE headquarters in Virginia Beach with the guy that had done the channeling for Shirley MacLaine. And in that channeling, he talked about her past lives, but he, in terms of his own spirit, he had been an Egyptian mystic of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think if you're having those feelings, certain things begin to resonate in you, then it's something that, regression does that. Regression can help do that. And it varies from person to person. There's some people that are listening that probably never have had such a thought. And then there's other people who are going, oh, I'm sure glad I'm listening to this because, man, I'm dialed into something else. I don't know what it is. So you might want to go find out. You could be regressed. Regression is a very standard way of getting to it. If you have a specific memory or if something resonates with you, look into it.
You know what my fear is? This is my fear. I've done one regression session, full hypnotic thing, but it was about something else and it was done for TV. Okay. It wasn't a past life regression. But this is my fear though of a past life regression. So many times we hear, Cleopatra or Alexander the Great or whatever, right? That you were a king, a queen, a prince, or this. I get regressed and I'm making mud pies, in the slums of London in 1400, right? With no legs. I'm that dude. And I don't want to relive that.
Yeah.
And that's my. It's like a Pandora's box. You know what I mean? So I think I'm going to leave that alone unless I have a reason to do it.
And that makes sense. That's one of the reasons why I haven't done it. Okay. I firmly believe in what I said, but it's not important for me to know that, other than maybe my fixation on this was to make sure that my buddy was okay.
Right.
Because in the military, people care about their buddies.
That's right. Have you seen Masters of the Air?
No.
By the way, have you seen that yet?
No.
Okay. Write that down. Take your pen out, Bruce. Oh, it's not being in front of you. Okay. Masters of the Air. This is Steven Spielberg's new TV series.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you got to go watch that. I'm not going to say anything else about it. Just go watch Masters of the Air. It's absolutely incredible. So anyway, here's this. I'm going to tell you about this scenario, and I still can't explain it away. So I meditate, and I have this. Now I'm totally isolated. I've got isolation headphones on. I've got a blindfold on, and I'm completely cut off. And so anyway, out of everything that I could have had enter my mind, this is what happened. Again, I'm not Cleopatra, right? I'm not a king. I'm not a prince. I'm a person standing in a crowd watching a parade. Okay? And I can see the parade route in front of me, and I'm looking around, and I'm serious. It was like the Rose Parade kind of thing. And then off to my left and coming in is the start of the parade, and it's ancient Egypt. And I'm watching these like floats come by, these things and now I'm not in the parade. I'm not a pharaoh. No, I'm just a person watching the parade, and it went on and went on, and I watched the whole thing, and it was hours go by, and I watched the whole parade. I watch it, and I come out of the meditation, right? I have no idea what's going on, and I take the blindfolds off. I take the thing, and I was like, "What?" And I said, "How long was that?" They go 10 minutes. I was like, "What?" I saw a 3-hour parade. And again, I wasn't part of the parade. I wasn't part of the majesty or anything like that. I was just a person in the audience watching this go by. And it was 3 hours, at least 3 hours long. I recall all of it. And the meditation itself was only 10 minutes. That's the part for me, Bruce, where that kind of recall is real.
Yeah.
It's real. I don't understand the time dilation part. How you can,
Well, time is our invention. Time is kind of a contrived convention for us to organize our space. Even with the equinox planting and so on and so forth. The ancient civilizations celebrate these events because the ground is fertile, things start to grow. So it's a way for us to organize it. But I think that's one of the mystical things, and there's a great deal of thought about and information out there about what you're talking about, that there might not be time in the sense that we define it. And that's kind of what, when James said one day, well, what's heaven like? It's right here. Well, can you come back? Well, you can come back if you want to. Or, do you necessarily go here? There's some people think that maybe they may have been on another planet excuse me, in another part of the universe.
Sure. Well, I often wonder, and if you've looked into this, our DNA and all of the quotes about how much memory capacity is there and what we use and what we don't use and what's junk DNA. And okay, all right, let's put all of that to the side for a second. But DNA itself and the transference of genetic material from your parents to you, that has information in it. And it comes from another generation before and before and before and before, and it's always there. The hard drive is not erased, right? We can chase back our family trees and the migration of the human species around this planet from that genetic information that is stored there in DNA. And so why is it's a crazy thought to think that a memory like that of me walking through whatever Ollantaytambo in Peru, or the Temple of the Sun in Mexico City, and you have a recall of that. Well, yeah, why not?
Yeah. Well, that's what the Akashic records are all about.
Right.
Talks to the people that access them. My way of looking at this is, you have a little thumb drive for your computer. Hold on. And you can record something that happened 20 years ago. And you can plug it in, and you can remember it just like it was there. And it doesn't matter how long it takes, that slideshow that I sent you. Energy in a sense is conserved. I think that's one of the first laws of thermodynamics. If I light a match, global warming is all about energy being conserved. The carbon going up in the air after something burns, and changing the environment. That energy is still there. So that's the same thing with our souls. And yeah, I mean, you can daydream, I can sometimes catch myself daydreaming if I might take a nap in the afternoon, catch myself daydreaming and going off to sleep and thinking about some series of events that I've either went through that I'm remembering, or it's like, wow, what's that about? I used to have dreams about being on a path and going in different directions and searching for something. And part of that search, I believe, is why I'm sitting here. It's a search for finding me and finding the place where I do my best and live my life in a way that causes me
get you off this planet. Yeah, right. And isn't that such a fascinating subject, that these questions, as fundamental as they may be, they have been asked for thousands and thousands of years.
Right.
Before there was books published on this, we were asking, why are we here?
Yeah.
What happens when we die? Are we alone in the universe? What's the meaning of life? These are the basic fundamental. Do you think that we will ever get to these answers? Did James help you with those answers?
Yes. And in terms of that, in terms of James having picked me to be his parent and Andrea, we had dinner with Montel Williams before we were on a show, and he actually asked that question on the show. Well, how do you feel about the fact that your son picked you? Now, most parents don't ever think about that, because pregnancy is, people become pregnant because something happens. The whole idea of being picked,
right,
to his parent, and then seeing what has happened as a result of that, where all I wanted to do is protect him, make sure he was okay. Writing the book was all about, this is what happened. I don't know how it happened. I'm not even sure why it happened. I can just say it's no coincidence, because there's just a long list of things that are too crazy that they can't be a coincidence. Like when James named his toys Billy, Walter, and Leon. And then when I finally asked him that one about Walter, because Walter had red hair, and I knew one of the pilots on the squadron who had been killed was an Irishman from Queens named Jack Devlin, or John Devlin. And they said those three guys, Billy, Walter, and Leon, greeted me when I went to heaven. Well, he named those three toys after three of the guys that had been killed in the same squadron. And those toys looked like they had the same hair colors as each of the men that were killed.
Jennifer just popped up in the chat with, hello, Jennifer, how you doing? Was James Little Man? Who was Little Man?
I think it was James. Yeah. Little Man.
Yeah. Did James, was this your own conclusion, or did James mention this?
Well, he said, I'm the little man that couldn't, it's me. Okay.
I got you.
Now, when he said he was trapped and he couldn't get out, I learned an anecdote from Jack Larson. When you would fly in a Wildcat and they would land, they would always make sure that they had their canopy locked open, because if they hit too hard, the canopy would come flying shut and jam shut. And they were always concerned that if they went into the water when they were landing, that they wouldn't be able to get out of the airplane.
Man. Yeah.
That was something that Jack Larson described to me. And he described almost crashing in the water one time when he took off, and he was so glad that he had his canopy open. Okay.
What are you working on now, and how can everybody reach out to you?
Well, I'm not working on this book. There's a second book that I wanted to write and that I've thought about doing. But my email address is bruce.leininger@hotmail.com. You can send me an email. I'm on Facebook. There's a couple of groups. I even have a small page on Facebook about Soul Survivor. I don't spend that much time with it, but I'm also realizing because of some of the things that I'm doing, that I'm ready for something not different, but ready for something that is part of why I'm here.
It'll come find you. You know that. That's how the universe works, Bruce.
Yes.
When you least expect it, there it is.
And that's good old James showed up.
Listen, Bruce, thank you so much for not only sharing the story, but all of the hard work that you are doing, have done, and getting all of this together for us. It's an amazing story. And I know that James has moved on and everything else. But if you think about it, tell him James says hello. Okay. I'm number 4. I'll talk to you.
And you have my email address, so if there's anybody that's out there that wants to know how to find me, that would be the easiest way.
I can take care of that too as well. Thank you so much. Right, Bruce, be safe and be well. Everybody, the links for Soul Survivor are below over on our website and throughout social media. Bruce, perfect night tonight on the show. Thank you so much. All the best to you and your family.
It was a privilege. Thank you for having me.
Bruce Leininger. And again, the links are below. We have them throughout social media and over on our website. What a perfect show tonight. It's an amazing, amazing story. Thank you, Bruce. And thank you, James. Wow. Incredible. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee Newman, and Michelle Freed. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Dennis. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music, Doug Aldrich. Intro, Spaceboy, spaceboymusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. And this broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2024 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tomorrow night, Carrie Sudmeyer is with us. Oh, yeah, new movie out. We'll be doing that tomorrow night. But until then, I want you to be safe. Go Backley Tappy.